So the little girls are cleaning up their messes this morning, which is lovely. Um, let's see. The first thing I wanted to talk about was taking a break. Let's see. For the last 6 weeks, it's pretty much every day is just running. Like yesterday, I watered for about 10 hours with 12 trips back and forth between the pastures to check on water, plus transplanted. Honey, you don't have your chore done yet, so you need to put that back. Thank you. Planting garden stuff out. We can plant on May 15th because most things won't start to germinate for another couple weeks, which will give them time to be well established before we have some of our later frosts. Like on Memorial Day weekend, we always have snow, always have wind and sleet and snow, and I don't understand why people go camping on Memorial Day here, because the weather is wonderful for the plants and the trees, but not so wonderful for camping. Anyway, I wanted to talk about taking a break. So every once in a while, I will get under the weather, whether it's because I got sick, but I always kind of try to look at it as a blessing. And if you're a woman and you have somewhat painful menstrual cycles, or you just get tired, take advantage of it, especially, I don't know if it's even especially if you're a farmer, but to me, it's a gift from God. It's a time to recharge. It's a time to sit down and read a good book. Last month, I did not take that opportunity. I went out and I loaded a ton of hay to bring home, and then I went and made deliveries of milk and eggs to my mom. And apparently, I was so gray by the time I got to her house that she was a little worried, so she sat me down and pumped me full of good oils and all sorts of stuff, and I actually just sat at her house for 2 hours, not realizing how sick I had been feeling from overdoing it when I was on my menstrual cycle. So for you women out there, if you have the opportunity, put your feet up and read a good book on those days that you're not feeling well from your cycle. And if you don't have that opportunity, at least make sure you're taking plenty of magnesium, and that you're eating really good, and that when you have and that you put big, large, strenuous things aside and just do the minimum on those days. So today, that is what I'm doing. I'm putting my feet up. And so I have these little notebooks that I like to carry around in my pocket to make lists of things that are important when I don't have my big journal. And my gardening journal that I showed you guys before is already just completely chock full. So I've started a new one. And this one is a lot simpler. And the goal for this year is pretty now, in little paren. Pretty now. Because I see that I'm getting frustrated when things aren't turning out, that I've done so much work, and that from the street, I don't have nothing to show for it. If you drove past my house and just happened to look over, it would not be impressive at all. And so that's what I'm working on. Kaya, you may hand me the stapler and you may go get your work done. That makes me very unhappy that you are not obeying me. Thank you. So this is my journal. I like to keep scissors and hole punches and a pen and a glue stick. And so I'm starting all over this year. So I went through, and March was the month where things really started to happen. So this year I started out my calendar in March. And I eliminated anything extra. Thanks, honey, for putting that up. I eliminated anything extra and just really compiled really hard down to the things that definitely worked. And so like March is much, much smaller than in my last notebook. My last notebook, it had a lot more stuff in it. This time it has 2 things: cold starts and cold frames, and plant bare root trees and shrubs, and nothing else can happen in March. April, bare root trees, plant seeds that need scarified outside. So any of your herb seeds or anything that need a cold, hot, that's for April. Plant asparagus, plant strawberries, apply tree fertilizer. I apply tree fertilizer, which would be manure tea, to my trees that were new the year before. So I start applying it in April, even though I've still got rain and snow, because a lot of times it's been cold enough that those trees need a reminder that they're alive. So that's when I do my manure tea. So of course, all the normal winter mulch off perennials. So I put on a heavy mulch in the winter, like on raspberries and stuff, to suppress weeds in the spring. So when things start to be ready to bud out in the spring, I take that heavy mulch off and I just apply a light mulch. That way, as things that need to be able to come up from the roots come up, they are not smothered. Okay, so these last two shouldn't be here because that needs to be in May, I believe. Anyway, May, plant cold starts in cold frame. Plant hardy perennials, but keep them covered. Fertilize when planting. Start tomatoes and peppers. And then I haven't started June yet because we're not in June yet. But I will be compiling these in the month that I'm actually creating them. So I'm going to compile it from my old journal into my new journal the month that it happened so that I can reevaluate and see, was this that I wrote last year applicable at all while I'm in the moment of June. And then at the back, I did a lot more on ducks because I'm right in the middle of working with the ducks right now. So while I'm in the moment, I'm writing down everything that will help keep the ducks alive next year, and it was a lot. And then I haven't really filled anything else out yet. I like to have a little section with cardstock already pre-cut, so that I just, if I have a new page that I want to start, I've got it. And then I have a little bit of a journal, some journaling pages back here, and that is pretty much it so far. But Paige and Kai, you have not finished, and your hair is not brushed, so you may go finish that. Thank you. And what I wrote that I wanted to talk about today was some of the things that I was working on yesterday out in the field. And that is that on microclimates. When I first got here, the reason that I know that things die in the poison pasture is because I went out and planted things all over my property. I wanted to see what would happen in the different places in my property, what the soil was like, what the water was like, what the nutrition in the soil was like, all those things. So that's why I wanted to, so I planted trees in several locations, and I planted comfrey in several locations, and that's how I know now if I want something definitely to survive, I put it in my backyard with the mulch. Let's see, what was the other thing? And that if I want it to survive anywhere else, I've got to mulch just as heavily in a strip as I have in my backyard. They still won't do as well as they have done in my backyard, but they will at least survive. They won't thrive like they do in the backyard, but they'll make it. I have many microclimates right now. I have on the north side of the house, up close to the house, it stays cool but not cold. It's the last place that the snow melts, and so that's a microclimate. And then I have the microclimate up in the front pasture of heavy wind. So that's a microclimate. And then in the backyard, they're up against the white wall and the yellow straw. I've got an intensely hot, quite sheltered from the wind, but incredibly hot microclimate in the backyard. Along the back fence in my backyard, it is cooler because we have a little bit of breeze, and I have shade from the fence and shade from some of the trees. And so it's a more balanced microclimate along the fence in the backyard. In the back pasture, we have pretty much just normal land. We have enough grass out there that we have some water retention, and the wind isn't quite as bad across there because I have a tiny bit of a wind breakup. And so the back pasture is pretty much the most normal for Idaho place. And I don't have anything but trees planted back there just to get the windbreak started. So I have taken cheap, inexpensive trees and planted them in multiple places just to see, well, did they do better here or did they do better here? And especially I'm doing an experiment with more frost sensitive plants like peaches and cherries. I have them planted in 1, 2, 3, 4 places. I want to see what my whether the frost sensitive plants prefer the hot microclimate in the backyard or the cooler, slower to mature microclimate of the front yard where they blossom later in the year. So we'll see about that. The problem with that is that bees, apparently, from Paul Wheaton's Reverence for the Bees, podcast, he talks about how bees will go out and forage for the same plant on one day. They want all the peaches at the same time. They want all the apricots at the same time. They don't go between species. They stay with one species. And because of that, if you don't have all your peaches close to each other, they might not all get fertilized. And even though peaches are self-fertilizing, whether it's apples, you want all your apples done, appropriately, which means you need to have them close together. So there's that. I don't know if the distance of 75 yards is too far since there's a house in between them. I don't know. So that's one thing, is that bee fertilization, you want to have all of your plants of a certain kind together. You don't want a monocrop. You want other things planted with them, but you want all those particular kinds of plants within a really pretty close distance if you want them all fertilized. The other thing is rabbit manure. So I've had many trees from last year that have not leafed out yet. But when I scratched their bark just in a tiny place to see if they were still green, they're all still alive. And those are the ones that I go out and I dump manure tea on. So I take my rabbit manure, I put it in a bucket, I pour water over it, and I let it sit for a couple days. Now, when you do like the Save-A-Tree stuff that you get at the garden nurseries, that's like $16 for a gallon. And it says you're supposed to dilute it down to the color of wheat tea, and that's crap. Well, it is crap, but it's also crap. I've used Save-A-Tree, and I don't know that I would say that it does any miracles, but I will tell you what does do miracles. It's if you take your rabbit manure and you put it in until it's about the color of coffee. So good, strong coffee. I mean, it's not weak tea. And I take that to my trees that are not making it. Now, I don't do this if they're just in plain dirt. I only do it if it's in lots of mulch. And what I believe that I'm doing is inoculating the mulch with bacteria. It's not that I'm feeding the plant. It's that I'm feeding the bacteria with the straw that's around the plant, and the bacteria is going to turn that mulch into dirt. Because in a lot of these places where the trees aren't doing well, they're actually just planted in gravel. Gravel and really coarse sand that's almost gravel. So they don't have a lot of dirt on their roots. And so the reason I believe it works on my property is because my soil is so poor, and what I'm actually doing is inoculating my heavy mulch with good bacteria to create good dirt. That's really pretty, honey. And so, I don't know if I can do this with one hand, babe. And so, if I have a tree that's not making it, and here, honey, you're going to have to hold on to it till I'm finished because I can't hold the camera. And so, if I come to a tree that's gray and the bark is starting to kind of break up a little bit and it looks terrible, but I know that it was okay last year, then I will take, every day, I will take it a bucket full of rabbit manure tea. And surprise, surprise, I have been able to rejuvenate probably 8 or 10 trees that way this year. Aspen, or what was the other that was having a hard time? I did it with a fruit tree last year. So if you have really subpar soil and you have enough mulch to put around it so that so that the soil can handle that much nitrogen, that's what I do. Instead of spending $16 a bottle for Save-A-Tree, I just use my rabbit manure. And I did this the first year that I had the windbreak in the back. So the first year we were here, one of my neighbors, we didn't have rabbits at the time. We'd butchered them all just before the move. my neighbor said that she had a friend with rabbits that wanted to sell some big bags of rabbit manure. And she wanted like $2 a bag for them. So I gave her $2 a bag, and I got 7 bags, and I used it. That's how I used it, except instead of just tea, I used the solids. So I was dumping these huge bags of rabbit manure into these tubs, filling them with water, and then I took the solids. So half of what was in the bucket was actually just saturated rabbit manure, and the other half was water, and I was dumping it at the base of my my hybrid poplars that were in my windbreak. And I thought I was going to kill them, but I didn't know how else to get the manure onto them without having the rabbit pellets float away when we flooded. And they did so well that year. All those trees just took off and did so well, and I never put 2 and 2 together. I was just trying to get rid of all the rabbit manure. I had all this rabbit manure. I needed to do something with it. And so I was just, partially diluting it in water and then taking huge bucketfuls of it to the bottom of the trees. And so if I had that many rabbits, I would do that to all my trees, because the little bit of water that has the urine and the manure tea in it percolates into the ground the time when you apply it. But because of the solids, the rest of that dissolves as it rains or snows or you water. And so because it's solid and slow release, every time you water, it gets reapplied if you have those solids at the bottom of the tree. But I don't have nearly enough rabbits to be able to do that to all my trees. I have a friend with rabbits, and I need to go see if she would let me have all of her rabbit manure, because I have to take it in liquid form because I just don't have enough manure to go around. Anyway, that's what we've been doing. And if you don't have a garden journal yet, and a garden calendar, or a homestead journal and a homestead calendar, make sure to get one built up, because it helps you not be running around in circles, and it helps you see when you're making progress.